The night at the hospital was quiet. Emergency lights softly illuminated the sterile walls, creating an atmosphere of serenity. Nurses and doctors on the night shift exchanged hushed conversations, with only the occasional sound of footsteps echoing through the deserted corridors. It seemed like the night would pass uneventfully until the automatic doors at the main entrance began to slide open slowly. Everyone assumed it was another patient, but instead a German shepherd stepped into the lobby. Its fur was matted with dried mud, and its deep eyes reflected both exhaustion and unwavering resolve. This was Bruno, a dog who had once served honorably in the police force and was now retired. Bruno moved cautiously but with clear purpose, carrying a small bundle wrapped in an old rag in his jaws. The nurses froze, exchanging stunned glances. One of them, overcoming a moment of hesitation, stepped forward, curiosity outweighing fear. When the bundle was gently unwrapped, time seemed to stop in the room. Inside was a baby, tiny, fragile, and barely breathing. His skin was pale, his chest rising and falling unevenly. "My God, it's a baby!" a nurse gasped, her voice trembling with shock. The stillness of the night shattered instantly as the emergency room sprang into action. Doctors and nurses rushed to work, their hurried footsteps reverberating through the halls. Medical equipment was swiftly prepared, and the team set about saving the frail infant, each second feeling like part of an urgent countdown. No one in the ward could believe what was happening. A dog had brought a baby on the brink of death into the hospital. Bruno stood still, silent and composed, showing no trace of fear or distress. Yet his gaze was filled with a desperate plea for help. The medical staff, seasoned by countless emergencies, had never encountered anything like this. "Check his breathing and pulse immediately," a doctor ordered, snapping everyone out of their daze. Another nurse knelt beside the bundle, her hands shaking as she carefully unwrapped the cloth. The baby's skin was icy cold, his tiny body covered in dirt, and his breathing faint and irregular. "This baby is severely dehydrated and malnourished," the head doctor stated grimly. "We need an IV now. Stabilize his breathing right away." The heart monitor emitted slow, weak beeps, underscoring the dire situation. A nurse quickly connected the infant to an oxygen supply, adjusting the flow with care. They all worked in tense silence, the air thick with anxiety as they fought to save the child's life. While the medical team focused on the baby, one nurse couldn't help but glance at Bruno. The German shepherd remained at the entrance, unmoving, his eyes locked on the child as if awaiting a miracle. He didn't bark or growl, just watched, his gaze carrying an intelligence and urgency that felt almost human. "This is so bizarre. How did he know to bring the baby here?" the nurse murmured under her breath, her face a mix of awe and confusion. No one had an answer, but it was clear to all. Bruno had acted as if this were the most critical mission of his life. The doctors worked tirelessly. One nurse adjusted the baby's oxygen levels, while another checked his temperature. "He's still weak, but his vitals are starting to stabilize," someone reported quietly. The tension in the room eased slightly as the baby's condition showed faint improvement. Though everyone knew it was just the beginning, the child remained in critical condition. Thanks to Bruno, he now had a fighting chance. The dog, though visibly exhausted, never took his eyes off the infant. The room fell into a brief, profound silence as the staff processed the extraordinary event. Word of the strange incident spread quickly through the hospital, and soon the police were called for assistance. Officer Carlos, the lead investigator, arrived with his team. Entering the emergency ward, he listened to the nurse's account, their faces still etched with shock. "We have no clue where the dog came from," the head nurse explained, her voice slightly shaky. "He brought the baby in, placed it on the floor, and just stood there. That's all we know." Carlos narrowed his eyes, studying Bruno at the entrance. "A dog brought a baby to the hospital? That's hard to believe," he muttered, though his expression softened as he observed the dog's calm yet watchful demeanor. "Has anyone checked for a chip?" Carlos asked. A young officer stepped forward with a portable scanner, but as he approached, Bruno backed away, tense but not aggressive. His gaze remained sharp, as if warning them not to come closer. "This dog's trained," the officer remarked. "He might be a retired police dog." Carlos nodded and took a slow, non-threatening step forward. "Easy, buddy," he said gently. Bruno studied him for a moment before allowing the officer to attach a leash. Let's see where he came from, Carlos directed, signaling his team to follow. Bruno began walking with steady, deliberate steps, as though he knew exactly where he was headed. The police followed closely, the flashing lights of their patrol cars casting long shadows on the pavement. They moved through the city streets in silence, tension building with each passing block. "Where's he taking us?" an officer whispered. Finally, Bruno stopped in front of an old, dilapidated house in a deserted part of town. The front door was ajar, as if someone had left in a hurry. Carlos frowned. "This is it," he said quietly. The officers exchanged wary glances before cautiously approaching the entrance. A stench of mold, stale air, and rotting food greeted them as they stepped inside. Bruno led them through a cluttered living room to a small door at the back of the house. "Stay sharp," Carlos ordered, his voice low and tense. Opening the door revealed a small, dimly lit room. In one corner stood an old, dusty crib, surrounded by signs of recent occupancy, an empty dog food bowl, a tattered blanket, and a few children's items scattered across the floor. Bruno slowly approached the crib and sniffed the spot where the baby had once been. "The baby was here," an officer whispered, his face hardening as he took in the scene. Exhausted, Bruno finally collapsed beside the crib, his body going limp, as if he were allowing himself to rest for the first time. His mission was complete. The officers continued searching the abandoned house, their flashlight beams cutting through layers of dust in every corner. The wooden floor creaked under their boots with each careful step, and everything inside spoke of long neglect. Overturned chairs, empty cabinets, and a dining table littered with crumpled papers. "It looks like whoever lived here left in a rush," an officer noted, flipping through the scattered documents on the table. Meanwhile, another officer explored the kitchen. The sink was full of dirty dishes, and a faint odor of rotting food lingered in the air. On the countertop, a crumpled envelope caught his eye. He picked it up, opened it, and found a handwritten letter inside. The writing was shaky, as if penned under extreme distress. "There's a letter here," he announced, then began reading aloud. "I no longer have the strength to care for him. Everything around me is falling apart. All I have left is Bruno, and I know he'll do the right thing. I hope someday someone forgives me." His voice trailed off, the final words hanging in the stillness. There was no signature, but the message was painfully clear. The author had reached a point of utter desperation and entrusted their child to their only remaining companion, the loyal dog, Bruno. "Bruno's been watching over the baby this whole time," an officer murmured, glancing at the German shepherd lying by the crib. Bruno remained still, though his ears twitched slightly, still alert. "We need to find the mother," Carlos ordered firmly. "We have enough evidence to know she's in serious trouble." The officers began canvassing the few neighbors still living nearby. After some time, they found an elderly man who recalled the house's previous occupant. "I remember a young woman who lived here," he said, leaning on his cane. "She was always with a big dog. That must be him." He nodded toward Bruno. "I think she was struggling. I saw her with a baby a few months back, but then she just vanished." The story was starting to come together. A woman, overwhelmed by hardship, had in a moment of despair placed her trust in Bruno, the dog who safeguarded her family to the end. Based on the letter and the neighbor's account, the police widened their search. Hours later, they received a report of a young woman wandering in an exhausted state at a nearby park. When the team arrived, they found her sitting motionless on a bench, clutching herself tightly against the cold. Her eyes were vacant, her face gaunt, her hair disheveled. Carlos approached cautiously, maintaining a serious but non-threatening tone, choosing his words carefully. "We found a child who was brought to the hospital. A dog led us to an abandoned house nearby. Do you know anything about this? We need to ensure the child's safety." The mention of the child made her eyes widen with shock and hope. "Mateo? Is it my son? Is he alive?" she stammered, her voice quivering as tears streamed down her face. She pressed her hands to her mouth, her body shaking with emotion. Carlos exchanged glances with his team, realizing they'd found the right person. He nodded gently and reassured her. "We found him. Mateo's in the hospital receiving treatment. He's stable but still under observation." Sophia broke down in sobs. After days of despair, a faint glimmer of hope pierced her soul. Medics quickly placed her on a stretcher to assess her condition and headed back to the hospital. On the way, Sophia began to share her story. "Mateo's father abandoned us right after he was born," she said, her voice hoarse with pain. "I tried to hold on, but everything fell apart. We ran out of food, out of money. I couldn't keep going." She paused, her gaze drifting to a past filled with dark memories. "Bruno was always there for us. He never left my side or Mateo's. When I was too weak to go on, I told Bruno. I asked him to take Mateo somewhere safe." Silence filled the ambulance as the officers and medics absorbed the weight of her words. The idea of a dog guiding a child to the hospital seemed unthinkable. Yet Bruno had done just that. When the ambulance reached the hospital, Sophia was escorted to the pediatric unit. Her heart pounded as she neared the room. Despite his exhaustion, Bruno stood and walked beside her, his gaze steady and vigilant. Inside, Sophia saw her son lying on a small bed, surrounded by medical equipment. His breathing was steady, his skin no longer deathly pale. Tears filled her eyes as she gently touched his tiny face. "Mateo, my baby," she whispered, her voice breaking with emotion. Bruno stood silently at the doorway, watching them with calm, observant eyes. Sophia turned to him, overwhelmed with gratitude. "Thank you, Bruno. You saved my son. You saved my family," she said softly, her voice trembling with emotion. The doctors and officers stood quietly, moved by the profound moment unfolding before them. Bruno wasn't just a dog. He was a protector, a silent hero who had fulfilled his mission with unmatched loyalty and love. Sophia was allowed to stay by Mateo's side as the doctors continued monitoring his condition. After a few hours, the boy began showing clear signs of recovery. Though still weak, he started to respond faintly to his mother's familiar voice. Sophia held his tiny hand gently, her eyes glowing with love and hope. Bruno lay near the doorway, his body weary, but his ears alert. The doctors and nurses who had witnessed the entire story couldn't hide their admiration for the loyal dog. One nurse smiled and patted Bruno's head gently, whispering, "You're a real hero. Thanks to you, this little boy is alive." Bruno wagged his tail slightly, as if understanding the heartfelt praise. Sophia looked at him with deep gratitude. "You saved us, Bruno. I'll never forget what you've done," she said softly, her voice quivering with emotion. After several days of treatment, the doctors confirmed that Mateo was out of critical condition and steadily improving, thanks to the dedicated care of the medical staff. The boy was slowly regaining strength. Meanwhile, hospital social workers stepped in to help Sophia secure temporary housing and access essential support. The day of discharge arrived on a bright, sunny morning. Sophia held Mateo in her arms, her face showing both exhaustion and renewed hope. As she stepped through the hospital doors, sunlight bathed her son's face. Mateo opened his eyes wide, gazing at his mother with curiosity, and gave her a faint, tender smile, the first she'd seen in days. Bruno walked beside them, his stance steady but watchful, as if he still felt duty-bound to protect them. Sophia paused, bent down, stroked Bruno's head and whispered, "We made it, Bruno. Thanks to you, we have a chance to start over." News of their emotional story spread throughout the local community. When Sophia arrived at her new home, strangers showed up with gifts for Mateo: clothes, food, toys. Some even offered her job opportunities, eager to help her rebuild her life. The first few days in their new home were challenging, but with the support of kind neighbors and Bruno's unwavering loyalty, Sophia knew she no longer had to face everything alone. She watched Mateo crawl across the floor, his bright, lively eyes full of wonder. "We made it through, Bruno," she said softly, stroking the dog's head. Bruno looked at her with his calm, wise eyes as if to say he understood. Bruno's story isn't just one of miraculous survival. It's a testament to love and loyalty that transcends all boundaries. The emotional journey of Sophia, Mateo, and Bruno ended with hope for a new beginning. But this tale teaches us something deeper. The power of loyalty, love, and sacrifice can forever change a family's destiny. If this story inspired you, we'd love to hear your thoughts. Share your feelings in the comments and tell us what you think of Bruno's incredible courage and the family's journey to survival and hope. Hit the like button if you want to help spread this uplifting message, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you won't miss more inspiring stories like this. We're thrilled to have you as part of our growing community of people who cherish meaningful stories. Thank you for reading. See you next time.